Okay, we're back to finish up our discussion about corporate integrity agreements. Let's have a closer look. Okay, we talked about these different obligations under the corporate integrity agreement. You can kind of think of this as, I like to think of it as kind of a deal, a legal deal where the practice doesn't get, and provider doesn't get the book slammed at them, but they have certain obligations to meet. And part of those obligations are to pay fines, penalties, pay back overpayments, and enter into an agreement. So in other words, as part of the agreement, because the practice was involved in this kind of behavior, you're under these guidelines for typically 5 years. There's a yearly audit that's done by an impartial third-party review organization that's approved by the OIG. And if the practice continues to have an error rate that's equal to or greater than 5%, there are additional penalties, maybe financial, maybe an extension of the integrity agreement, and so on. And again, some of the things that happen as an outcome of these corporate integrity agreements, you have to have a compliance officer, compliance committee, policies and procedures, comprehensive employee training, independent review, have an internal disclosure program so people can confidentially report these things, report any overpayment, and so on. One of the important things to do with the corporate integrity agreement is to have a compliance plan in place. This is something that is critical to do. All organizations should have it, but if you don't have a compliance plan, if you don't have something written down, when you're under a corporate integrity agreement and you have nothing in writing that doesn't talk about the types of audits that you do and what your plan is and where the results are being reported to, you are going to continue to be in trouble, and this is not where practice wants to be. If you do routine audits, they should be part of the overall plan. So in other words, every department or every service gets claims audited. We do 5% of all claims or whatever it is. The what isn't as important as you must have some sort of compliance plan in place. And sometimes these will go out to external auditors like Deloitte and Touche, PricewaterhouseCoopers, what have you. A number of different ways people can do it. How you do it is not as important as actually doing it. You have to have some sort of plan in place. Again, some of the other things people do is the focused audit. So if people have an issue with E&M modifier 25, that's going to be part of our focused audit to address this and be compliant per the corporate integrity agreement. And again, the independent review organizations that we mentioned, the OIG doesn't tell you who to select. They give you a list, and then you can do those. A lot of these people that work for these independent review organizations are typically people with coding credentials. And we used to have them fly all over the place to do these types of audits. Now, of course, they're all done remotely. Give people remote access. They can do it from anywhere in the US or, for that matter, the world. Good rule of thumb is to hire an independent review organization concurrently. And again, a lot of people like to do these as what we used to call pre-audit audits, right? They're external, so they're not under the jackboot of the practice itself. They can be more objective. A lot of plus side to doing this. Typically, these independent review organizations have both coding and billing auditors, also some financial people involved, lawyers, what have you. Again, we talked about a a compliance plan, audits. This ideally should be an annual report. Always a good practice to have, but an even better practice and an essential practice under a corporate integrity agreement. Things that go in an annual report include such things as any training programs, compliance policies and procedures, training elements, results of audits, some sort of proof of the existence of a confidential disclosure and reporting program, any personnel actions related to any compliance issues, and confirmation that employees are not on the OIG list of excluded individuals. And the website states on the OIG, most corporate integrity agreements require claims to review to be conducted by an independent review organization, in some cases by the provider with a verification review performed by the independent review organization. The claims review procedures require a discovery sample of 50 sampling units to be randomly selected. If the net error, financial error rate of these exceeds 5%, then a full sample is reviewed and a systems review is conducted. The full sample must include a sufficient number of sampling units to yield results that estimate the overpayment in the population within a 90% confidence and 25% precision level. Requirements of the claim review are described in detail in the claims review appendix. So that covers what we have to say about the corporate integrity agreement. And that's all I have for you. Stop by office hours if you have any questions about anything covered in these video lectures. We'll see you online. Have a great week.